Insomnia, lack of energy, inability to focus, depression, anxiety, worrying about the fact you're worrying about the fact you're worrying about the fact you're worrying. You get the point. We can all agree overthinking is at the root cause of all of our life's problems. So whether you're overthinking a little bit more than you'd like to, or you're overthinking all of the time, here's how to stop. But first of all, we've got a big nut to bust. Myth to bust. You're not born an overthinker. You learn it. Worrying and rumination are learned strategies you choose throughout life to help you better deal with problems consciously or unconsciously. But this is great news, because it means if overthinking is learned, then it's a habit. And if it's a habit, you can change it. But the 4 common unhelpful ways we try to deal with overthinking are by constantly looking for threats in response to a potential scenario. Do they like me? If you're thinking socially. Or what if this happens? What if this goes wrong? Number 2, seeking answers and reassurance by external means. Relying on other people to reassure you that everything will be fine, don't worry. Or relying on the internet to provide you with answers. This is a slippery slope, however, because the more you rely on external means to self-soothe, as soon as those external means are pulled from underneath you, you're going to plunge yourself into disaster. Number 3, excessive planning. You feel you must have a plan before you make a decision or in response to something happening. However, it's a slippery slope as well, because if you're in a situation where you can't make a plan, it's all going to go tits up, as we say. Number 4, you start to worry about worrying and try to challenge your thinking with more thinking. But the 2 main therapeutic approaches to dealing with overthinking are cognitive behavioural therapy and metacognitive therapy. CBT is where you try to change your negative thoughts by replacing them for more compassionate alternatives. Metacognitive therapy, on the other hand, is known as lazy therapy, whereby you don't try to change your negative thoughts, you simply let go of them. By using 4 practical tools we're going to explore in this short video. We're going to adopt the approach of metacognitive therapy in this video because although well-intentioned and useful at certain times throughout your life, the main problem CBT creates when trying to deal with overthinking is it gets you to focus more on your negative thoughts, which isn't what you want if you want to stop overthinking. Additionally, it was the founder of metacognitive therapy, Adrian Wells, who demonstrated overthinking is a learned habit throughout life, not something you're born with. And finally, a study of 174 depressed patients showed that 74% of those who were put through metacognitive therapy, as opposed to 52% who did CBT, recovered from their depression. So enough of the overview and busting myths. Let's get into the 4 ways to stop overthinking from Pia Kallesen's book, Live More, Think Less. She's a Swedish metacognitive therapist. Number 1, get to know your trigger thoughts and let them be. Each day throughout your life, your brain is producing thousands of thoughts, memories, emotions, and associations between those thoughts, memories, and emotions. And most of the time, your thoughts come and go. But every now and then, there are those thoughts that stay rooted in your attention for much longer than you'd like. These are known as your trigger thoughts. The thoughts that when you pay attention to them, they spark an explosion of associations between other thoughts, memories, and emotions linked to the first thought that sparks the explosion in the first place. But trigger thoughts aren't always negative. They can be very positive. Imagine you're sat at a restaurant and you overhear a couple talking about their recent trip to Mexico. That can spark the positive associations you have between the thoughts, memories, and emotions of your trip to Mexico 6 months ago. But when it comes to understanding trigger thoughts at a much deeper level, think about them as if they are the multiple different trains coming in and out of a big train station. And each train has a different number of carriages, which will affect how fast that train can travel. And each train has a different number of destinations that it could take you to. If you imagine a big train station like London Victoria with 15 to 20 different platforms, multiple trains coming in and out of every single day. You can go as far afield as Bristol, Wales, Manchester, Glasgow, France, Brighton, what have you. Take a quick example. The next departure is the social fear train at 1 o'clock. It has one carriage, 6 destinations. First destination is, what if they don't like me? Up next is, if they don't like me, I won't be able to cope. Up next, I've never been able to cope. Remember what happened a year ago at that party when I told that story that completely bombed? In fact, my social skills are completely non-existent. Fifth destination, I might as well stay in tonight. Final destination, yeah, I'm going to make a fool of myself if I go. I'm just going to decline the invitation. Some other departures we've got are train of uncertain future, 1 o'clock, depression loop, train is leaving at 2 o'clock, you get the point. But the bottom line here is, the problem isn't the fact that these trains exist and they're coming in and out of the train station. The problem is you choosing to jump on these trains and be taken to the destinations. Because what would happen if you decided to not get on the social fear train, for example, and instead focused your attention elsewhere? The train would still exist, but eventually it would depart at 1 o'clock, with or without you. So this leads us very nicely into point number 2. Oh no, which is still linked to the analogy of the train, which I have just rubbed out. Point number 2. There we go, maintenance done. Number 2, recognise what you can and can't control. When we use the phrase thought pattern, what we're describing is the process by which you notice what trains are at the station, what trigger thoughts have arisen, and choosing repeatedly over time to get on to the same train that takes you to the same set of destinations. And that process has become so rehearsed over time that obviously it's automatic, and because it's automatic, you believe that it is completely out of your control to change, but it's not. Of course, you can't control, as we've mentioned, the fact that this train or trigger thought exists. You can't control whether your thoughts arise or not. You can control whether you board the train, as we've mentioned. And what we mean by that practically is you can control whether you act upon this thought, whether you accept it as fact, whether you question the thought or not, or whether you divert your attention elsewhere to either other thoughts or other activities. But in keeping with point number 3, questioning the thought, you might like to question the trigger thought along the lines of, is this thought based on facts? Is it in favour of me thinking and feeling how I want to think or feel? Have I followed this thought pattern before, and if so, where did it lead me? Just some points of inspiration. But you can think of your position in the train station most of the time as if you are always looking at the departure board. You're noticing what thoughts are coming, what trains are in the station that you could get on. And you can't always control all of the trains that are on the departure board that are available to board. You can control some of them, of course, by cultivating thoughts at will and diverting your attention elsewhere. But your main job is to choose whether to board a train or not. Look, if the analogy of the train station isn't working for you, think about trigger thoughts as if they are like your phone ringing. You're working or something, or you're focused doing something, but then your phone rings, the ringtone goes off, and it starts vibrating. It's going to be very disturbing for the duration in which the phone is ringing. However, if you keep your attention on something else other than the phone ringing, what happens? The phone will eventually stop ringing. But if you're still ambivalent about whether thoughts do actually come and go, here's a final thought exercise upon this point. How many thoughts from yesterday do you remember? For me, I can only think about 2 or 3. So that shows thoughts do come and go when you put your attention elsewhere. Point number 3, let's now get into the practicalities of putting your attention elsewhere. Number 3, postpone and reduce your worries. The main underlying belief people struggle to deal with when stopping overthinking is the belief that your worries cannot be postponed and you have to worry as soon as the trigger thought arises. In other words, you have to jump on the trigger thought train as soon as you see it. But you don't have to. You can save your thoughts for later. So the practical point here is each day set a time window in which you will do nothing but worry. Maybe between 6 and 7 or 6 and half 6 each evening. Don't do it 2 hours before bed because you want to be relaxed before bed, of course. But during this time window, you will do nothing but sit with a pen and a piece of paper and write down all of the things you're currently overthinking, all of the what ifs, the catastrophes, the potential worst case scenarios, non-judgmentally, with the sole purpose of just getting them out of your head and onto a piece of paper. During worry time, worry hard. And if you worry outside of worry time, kindly tell your brain, hi trigger thought, thanks for raising my awareness to your presence, but I'm going to think about you later. You'll get your chance to be paid attention to. This will serve 2 purposes. 1, it's going to challenge your worry postponement beliefs. You already do this in your life, by the way. You control your thoughts. Think about the last time you were scrolling and you saw a distressing piece of news, or you overheard a conversation that triggered you in some way to think a certain association of thoughts. But then you realised, oh, I've got a call, or I've got to go because I'm late for work, or I've got to get back to this thing. You choosing to not pay attention to this thing that was causing you to stress, to recalibrate your attention elsewhere, was an example of you controlling your thoughts. This is what worry time will help you do as well. Number 2, this will show you how your thoughts do disappear. Because most of the time, you might realise when you sit down to start worrying, you might have forgotten what you was worrying about earlier. Or now it's on a piece of paper in front of you, you look at it and think, that's not actually that hard to deal with. I've dealt with that before and I can just do this. There's nothing to worry about, it's all good. Setting a worry window is much like setting app restrictions on your phone. The whole point is to reduce the time that you spend worrying. So too with your phone. Setting restrictions, the whole purpose is to reduce the time you spend on your phone. This is very helpful, by the way. My worry time, I go on a walk, as some of you know, each night, and I speak to myself out loud. What's going on? How am I feeling? What am I worried about? Get it out into the universe so it's off my shoulders and I feel a lot more loose. Point number 4, final point. Final point number 4, avoid avoidance and train your attention. So far you might be tempted to think, what if I get rid of my trigger thoughts completely by listening to music all of the time, staying busy 24/7, or burying my head in an addiction or a bad habit? Will that stop myself from overthinking? Well, I'm here to tell you from experience of having done all of those things at the same time, no it won't. Because anything you avoid will just grow bigger, like a weed. So the key thing isn't to avoid your trigger thoughts, but to willingly expose yourself to them in order to realise you do have control over them and to learn how to deal with them, even though that sounds like a daunting task. Because if you avoid your trigger thoughts, but then you're in a situation where you have to face them, you're screwed. Because you don't have the psychological tools on your tool belt in order to deal with them. The analogy here is, in order to ride a bike, you need a bike. Sounds simple, but in order to learn how to deal with your trigger thoughts, you have to expose yourself to them. But sometimes you're going to fall off the bike. Meaning, in our analogy of the trains, sometimes you're going to accidentally step on that trigger thought train and be like, oh no, that was just automatic. I didn't actually want to go in this destination. Let me get off for the next stop. And remember, when we say trigger thoughts, we're talking about those central thoughts that spark the negative association and rehearsed patterns that you usually go down. For example, for me, a situation in my life is I'm thinking about where to move out to. I'm going to move out of this house soon. Do I want to stay in the UK or do I want to go abroad have been the central themes of me overthinking. But when I overthink about going abroad, the central thought is, Will I actually fit in? Will I make friends? Can I be bothered to go abroad again? Will it all work out? What if, what if, what if? So keep those thoughts in mind as your central trigger thoughts for the situation you're overthinking about. But now we're going to do an exercise. Let me prime the room and talk you through it. This quick but effective exercise will teach you how to control your attention whenever a trigger thought arises. And I know you might be thinking, but Lewis, I can't be bothered to do an exercise. Look, I get it. But by doing this exercise, you're going to equip yourself with a tool you can use at any moment throughout your life to stop overthinking like that. And it's only 1:30 seconds. I'm going to guide you throughout the whole thing, and I'm going to do it with you, hence I'm sat down here. And all we're going to do is for the first minute, we're going to split that minute up into 3 20-second segments. And for each of those 20 seconds, all I want you to do is focus on one sound in your environment and ignore everything else. I'm going to tell you when to shift your focus onto a different sound. And after that minute, we're going to shorten the 20 seconds slightly to 5 seconds for each sound to get you to shift your attention a little bit quicker. So before we begin, have a little think about what those 3 sounds might be. Some sounds close by, it could be the buzzing you hear in the microphone feedback as we go silent, birds chirping outside, people doing things, or what have you. Have a little think about those 3 sounds. If you're in your room and there aren't 3 sounds, just find 1 or 2 you can focus your attention on, and whenever I say shift your focus, just shift your focus back and forth between that 1 or 2. But before we begin, to get ourselves primed for this, we're just going to do a quick breathing technique once. We're going to inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then exhale for 4 seconds. Okay? After 3, 3, 2, 1, inhale. Hold. Exhale. And now close your eyes and just focus on one sound in your environment and try to ignore everything else. And now shift your focus to another sound. And shift your focus to another sound. And keep your eyes closed. And now we're just going to shift our focus slightly quicker. So now focus on the first sound. And now on the second sound. Now to the third sound. And back to the first sound. Now to the second. And now to the third. Now you can open your eyes. And what that exercise demonstrated is your capability of being able to shift your attention onto different things in your environment away from other things. And what you might like to do to develop this capability further is do that for 2 minutes every single day. What you might like to do is set a stopwatch or a timer on your phone for 20 seconds, and each time that 20 seconds goes off, you focus your attention on a different sound in your environment, just like we did then. But if you want to step it up one level of difficulty, then you can do this. Think of one trigger thought that has really been distressing you recently. And what you do is you record a voice note of yourself saying that thought again and again and again for perhaps a minute long. And as you are doing the exercise of the timer has been set for 20 seconds, and each time it goes off, you focus on a different sound in your environment, you have that voice note of you saying that trigger thought again and again and again playing out loud. So you are testing yourself to have that trigger thought in your environment while you are focusing your attention elsewhere. For example, I recorded one of me saying, what if it all goes wrong? So I would close my eyes, I would focus on the sounds of the birds chirping outside, however the trigger thought would be playing.
What if it all goes wrong? What if it all goes wrong? What if it all goes wrong? What if it all goes wrong?
And even though listening to the thought might be distressing, what you'll realise is with more exposure to the thought and with more of a capability for you to divert your attention to sounds in your environment, you're able to realise that you can, even when the thought is present, shift your attention away from it. 2 minutes every day, something you might like to try. A final exercise you might like to try is the window pane exercise. And what you do is you get a erasable pen, or you fog up your window like this. Don't let the window cleaner see what you're doing. And you write, either with the pen or your finger, the trigger thought in front of you. So it will likely be a what if thought. What if she doesn't like me? What if I fail my driving test? What if it doesn't work out well? And you do two things. You first of all simply read the thought as it is in front of you, but then you change your field of vision to look beyond the thought at the view outside the window. And then you shift your vision back to reading the thought, and then again you shift your vision beyond the thought to see outside the window. And what this will demonstrate to you is your ability to focus your attention on something else, even when the thought is right smack bang in front of you. Finally, and back to the whiteboard, you might have the underlying belief that in order to make good decisions and keep your life in order, you need to overthink and be worried about things. But I really want you to challenge that belief by asking, has overthinking really led me to make better decisions, feel less stressed, or feel more control? I think if you investigate, you'll find that the answer is no. And then you're free to give yourself more permission to let go of your trigger thoughts and adopt the mindset of whatever happens, I'll figure it out, just like I always have. To play devil's advocate, just quickly, there are times in your life where you'll need to really think things through and lean into the productive sides of thinking. In which case, still apply the principle of setting a worry window, so worrying doesn't spill out of that time you've allocated for it. In summary, you're not born an overthinker, you learn it. Overthinking begins with trigger thoughts. To deal with trigger thoughts, you can either let them be, question them, or shift your attention. More specifically, the 4 points we covered in terms of solutions were: get to know your trigger thoughts and let them be, recognise what you can and can't control, set a worry window, and finally, avoid avoidance and train your attention. Thank you for your time and attention as always. Stay disciplined, playful and dangerous. Adios muchachos y muchachas.